Welcome to Go a Little Mad, a horror movie podcast. My name is Jason, and I love scary movies.
I'm Briana, and I don't. And this week we watched Halloween, the original.
1978, baby. This movie is 9 years older than me, and 8 years older than my ancient partner over there.
Wow, it's really rude.
Yep.
Okay, so what did you think of it?
Oh, I mean, I loved it. I love this movie. I hadn't seen it in a very, very long time, and I honestly didn't expect it to hold up as well as it did. What about you?
Well, I thought it was too short.
Yes. To spoil the end, when the credits rolled, you were like, "That's it? It's over?" You were outraged.
But can you believe that I'm saying something is too short? A scary movie, I mean?
No, I feel like that speaks very highly of the movie.
I just felt like there just wasn't enough. It ended abruptly. I thought there'd be more. I don't know. But yeah, I still liked it.
You did say after it was over, like in the moment, you said it was boring. Do you stand by that?
No.
Okay.
My initial reaction is never my true reaction.
Okay.
I've noticed, because the lights are on when I have my initial reaction.
That is true, they are.
And then later we turn the lights off and I get scared. So.
All right.
All right, well, let's talk about who wrote this and starred in it. So it's written by two people. We have John Carpenter and Deborah Hill.
Queen Deborah Hill. She's been a producer for a very, very long time. John Carpenter insisted that she be credited as a producer on this when she helped him write it. And she was actually more responsible for the writing of this movie than John Carpenter was. The town Haddonfield is named after the town she grew up in. She did a lot of writing on this, and she went on to have a great career and often talks about how hard it is for a woman to break through in Hollywood. And if things were different, if women didn't face those additional barriers, I feel like she would be as iconic as John Carpenter would be.
Yeah, I read that he only did this. Well, he had two requests when he said he would do it, which was that it would be called John Carpenter's Halloween, but also that his girlfriend would be a producer/writer.
That is funny though, because it does kind of runs counter to the other. It's like she put so much work in this and I really need to see her credited for this, but make sure it's called John Carpenter's Halloween.
Yeah. And that's kind of how I felt. I was like, cool. Like he's bringing a woman up, which is great. He's using his white manness to bring someone up. Great. But then he's like, well, I'm going to take full credit for this. Yeah. And on IMDb, she's listed secondarily. And it just felt like, oh, she's probably just another, like, she probably did a little bit. And then when I read that, I was like, oh. And so I'm just surprised to learn that she did quite a bit on it, because it just didn't feel like that.
Yeah, she was central to this movie. And one thing I read really made a good point is that a lot of people call her John Carpenter's protege or say that he mentored her and stuff like that. Whereas on the other hand, she gave James Cameron one of his first jobs doing special effects on a movie she was producing. Nobody calls her James Cameron's mentor.
Exactly. Right. Yeah. Funny how that works.
Yeah.
Well, it was also directed by John Carpenter and stars, or as the credits say, introduces Jamie Lee Curtis as Laurie.
And Jamie Lee Curtis, for those of you that don't know, is the daughter of Janet Leigh from
Psycho,
our very first movie and the namesake of our podcast.
I knew that, and then I forgot it, and then I was reminded of it.
Her dad, Tony Curtis, was also an actor.
Oh.
Yeah. This movie was her break, but she didn't really need a break. It was going to happen.
Yeah, exactly. Donald Pleasance as Loomis, Nancy Kyes as Annie, PJ Souls as Linda, Brian Andrews as Tommy, and the infamous Kyle Richards as Lindsay. And we all know Kyle. She is from The Real Housewives of Beverly Hills.
Is it Beverly Hills? I don't know which one. I just know she's a housewife.
Yes,
I didn't know which
Beverly
one.
Hills.
So, yeah, I mean, depending on which kind of listener you are, right? If you're like on Briana's side of this, you know who she is. If you're just like a horror fan listening to this, you're on my side of this, you're like, you have no idea who she is. And that's totally fine. I also had no idea who she was until a couple years ago.
She is a child in this, but she carries through at least the last 2 Halloween movies.
Yeah, and I believe she was in Halloween 2 as well. But then she wasn't in like 3 or 4 or H2O or any of that, or the Rob Zombie ones.
But was anybody in H2O or the Rob Zombie ones?
I believe Jamie Lee Curtis returned for H2O, or there's one before H2O. Halloween Resurrection. Jamie Lee Curtis returned for that. Yeah. But no, most people, yeah.
So what's considered canon then?
Up until 2019, all of the Halloween movies were canon. Up until...
What?
All of the Halloween movies were canon up until the Rob Zombie remakes.
Oh, okay.
So 1 through 5, H2O, Resurrection, were all part of the same universe. And then the Rob Zombie remakes happened. They weren't good. I hated them.
And those are true considered remakes. They're not continuations of the story.
That is correct.
Okay,
yes.
Got it.
And then in 2019, they came out with Halloween, which is... Some people see it as a reboot, but it actually is a sequel to the first Halloween. It, as far as the official canon goes, it erases everything that came after the very first Halloween in 1978 and starts a new continuity there. So
God.
The official continuity, as of today, is Halloween 1978, Halloween 2018, Halloween Kills, and Halloween Ends. And that's it. That's the official.
So do you know why they took out, because there's at least a Halloween 2, 3, and 4, and
Resurrection, and H2O, and I believe there's a 5 too. There's a ton of them. And I don't know why. I'm sure that there are reasons why. I'm sure that the people who made and wrote the 2018 version, including Danny McBride, by the way, is a writer on that trilogy.
Oh.
Isn't that interesting? Yeah, and I believe his name is David Gordon Green. I should look that up. I'm not going to look it up. I'm sorry if it's incorrect. So David Gordon Green and Danny McBride, I think, just kind of wanted to make their own thing. And it's so hard to do that when you have to go up against 8, 9 sequels and just kind of keep telling that same story.
Yeah.
So I think it was just kind of a way for them to wipe the slate clean and say, hey, we're going to forget about all those like 80 horror sequels, cash grabs, and we're going to tell our own story. And if you watch Halloween 2018, which we really should at some point, whether it be for the podcast or just for us.
I'm sure we will.
It when it picks back up, it picks up in a very satisfying way coming off the end of this movie.
Okay. All right. Cool. So the summary is 10 years after murdering his sister, Michael returns home, but he has not changed. On Halloween, he stalks the streets of a small Midwest town to repeat history.
I'm sorry, I actually do have one more thing to add there.
Go ahead.
I don't know if you knew this or if you were confused about them talking about it in this movie, and you probably were like, oh, I guess I was mistaken. In later sequels that have now been voided, that aren't real, it is revealed that Laurie Strode is Michael Myers' sister.
Oh.
She was his younger sister who was like 2 years old at the time of the killings and then was like adopted, and they basically just never told her because, you know, that's a horrible past. So, you know, it's revealed, I want to say 2 or 3. It's definitely before 4. But either 2 or 3, it's revealed that she was adopted by the Strodes, and that is why Michael is obsessed with her.
Okay. I was going to say, does he know?
Yes.
Okay.
And that continuity carried all the way through right up to the Rob Zombie remakes. But with it being picked back up in 2018, they completely dropped that storyline. What basically happened is Michael saw Laurie at the old Myers house when he escaped and became obsessed with her. And that's the official story.
I mean, yeah, that's the story that's portrayed in this movie.
Yes,
it's
in this
just,
movie.
He just picked her. That's
yes.
it. Which I like. I don't like it. I did always think she was his sister, and I don't know why. Ooh. I had no knowledge of this film, of who she was to him whatsoever. I guess I just feel like because there keeps being a story, or that there kept being a story, that she must be related. I don't know.
Yeah. And I mean, it's a logical thing. And that's like that was one of those things you just knew when you were a kid. Like, Laurie is his sister. Like,
yeah.
And they actually make like a little funny nod to it in the newer movies where somebody's like, I thought he was your brother. And she's like, no, that's just a rumor.
That's funny. I like that. Okay, so what is the Rotten Tomato score?
We have a 96 and 89. 96% from critics and 89 from the audience. So
well, that's not surprising.
People love it. Yeah. I mean, it's a great movie. You don't like any movies from the 70s, and you enjoyed it. So
as you said to me last night, I just don't like movies I haven't seen, apparently. So
yes, that is true.
And what did you find for flesh wounds?
Well, the first is just a little thing. It's not probably going to be news to anybody listening. I just like talking about it. Michael Myers, his name is not Michael Myers. Everyone talks about Michael Myers, but he is credited and always referred to as...
I forgot.
The Shape.
Yes.
Do you remember why they called him The Shape?
Yes. The Salem witch trials. That's what they called specters.
Yeah, spirits who harm others were called shapes. And I think they kind of just used it to reinforce the idea that Michael Myers is not human.
Yeah.
That's basically what Dr. Loomis is saying this entire movie. Like, this is not a person. You need to get it out of your head that this is a person because this is not human and you can't understand it.
Yeah, and it was something I come to eventually in my notes while I was like rewriting them. One of the things, and I think I talked to you about this while we were watching, that was the way that Michael moves when he goes to kill is like very quick, and it was surprising to me. And I don't know why. I guess I just feel like in most movies, there's more of a pause between the jump scare and the attack. And there isn't that in this movie. It's there he is, and he's on you. In combination with like a few other things that I'll talk about later, but like his movements definitely like reinforce like he is not a person.
Yeah, and it's also I think partly because if you think about the first half or even first 3/4 of the movie, you almost never see Michael move. He's always just standing there when we see him, and then we look away and then he's gone. So when he moves at all, it's almost like, oh my God, like,
yeah,
that's a statue.
And actually him walking or following the characters is something I expected to occur a lot more, and it only happens one time.
Yeah.
And it's not even quite the focus, which is maybe almost scarier. It's just happening. He's there in the background coming while she's trying to get into the house. And it's so like, ooh. But it only happens once. I was surprised.
Good scene. So moving on, money. Everybody likes talking about money. The budget for this movie was $350,000, which adjusted for inflation today is about $1.5 million. So it's like nothing. Like, you can't make a movie on $1.5 million today.
Right, yeah.
To give it a little more perspective, if you were to convert that to $1999, it's about $900,000, which means this was made on a smaller budget than the Blair Witch Project, which was at $1 million in 1999, and looks like it was shot on a $40 camcorder with no special effects and no budget whatsoever.
And nothing scary at all.
Yeah. So, I mean, John Carpenter himself was paid $10,000, which is about $45,000 in today's money, to co-write, score, and direct the film. Nick Castle, one of the actors who played The Shape, only earned $25 a day, which would be $114 a day in today's money. Not a lot of money going around. The last two things I have, the music is obviously, like, iconic. Right. I guess you had heard the song, but you didn't know it was from Halloween before this.
Yeah. So I've heard it, and I don't know in what, but just pop culture, probably anything talking about horror, anything talking about whatever. I've heard it before.
If you ever bought a cassette tape in the 90s or early 2000s that was like spooky noises to play at Halloween parties, you heard this song. That's where you heard it.
Yes. And it's also a TikTok sound currently, which I didn't know was for this movie.
Goddamn kids, their TikToks. But anyway, John Carpenter composed and wrote most of it himself, and he did it in 3 days. He did that little iconic piano part. He did that in like less than an hour. He just pulled that out of his butt, and 50 years later, it's incredible.
Stupid.
Yeah.
The fact that it's so good. It's so perfect for what it needs to be, I guess.
Absolutely. Yeah. The soundtrack in this movie is incredible. Like I said, John Carpenter wrote and performed most of it himself. There's some synthesizer that was added in after by an artist whose name I did not get. But other than that, it's just so good. A producer was shown an early cut of the film without the music and felt that the movie was not scary at all. And then when she saw the cut with music, the same movie, agreed that it was good. It was scary. And that's the soundtrack. It just makes you feel tense. Like, I was on edge the entire time this movie was, like, anytime the sound picked up,
yeah, you
got on edge, even though not a lot happened.
Yeah.
You know?
Well, and sometimes they pick up the music when something doesn't really happen, or it takes a while for something to happen, I noticed. But I can't imagine this movie without the soundtrack. So
yeah.
It was a good choice.
And the last thing I have is just a little bit related to John Carpenter's previous film, Assault on Precinct 13, which you might have heard of. They did like a remake of it, like in like 2010. I want to say with like Denzel or something. Like
I was going to guess him for no reason.
Yeah,
but...
somebody. I don't know. They did a remake. I haven't seen either version. I can't tell you if they're good or not. It had a little impact on the making of this movie in two ways. The first is Donald Pleasance, who plays Dr. Sam Loomis, who is kind of Michael's psychiatrist. Great character, great actor. He was also played Blofeld in James Bond, the early James Bond movies, which is the role that Christoph Waltz just took in the last couple James Bond movies. Anyhow, Donald Pleasance said this about taking the role of Dr. Loomis. The only reason I'm doing this movie is because I have alimony to pay, and my daughter in England is in a rock and roll group, and she said the music that John did for Assault on Precinct 13 was really cool. End quote. Iconic. And the other impact that this had was there wasn't a lot of blood in this movie. I think there were two scenes I noted when we were watching that had blood of any kind. It was very obviously fake and just like, it looked like ketchup.
It was like red paint.
Yeah, it was not good. That was actually by design, because in Assault on Precinct 13, there was a death scene involving a child, and it got a lot of criticism for being too graphic.
Yeah.
And so they really toned it down for this movie.
I can imagine, because I feel like even today with kids, they're still very delicate about what they show and what they don't.
Exactly. So here is the cool part, though. The child that was killed in Assault on Precinct 13, that was so graphic, that changed the way this movie was made, was played by Kim Richards.
Kyle's sister.
Kyle's sister. Exactly.
Also a former Real Housewife of Beverly Hills.
I didn't know that part. I just knew it was her sister. Unfortunately, I wasn't able to find any movies that John did with Kathy Hilton. So,
damn it.
Yeah.
And that's why Kathy's so mad at Kyle.
And again, for you horror fans, Kathy Hilton is the third sister. It was formerly Kathy Richards. She married What's-His-Face Hilton and is Paris Hilton's mom?
For sure.
Mark? Yes?
Yep.
Okay. Yes. Yeah. And was she a housewife too?
Currently, yes.
Oh, currently?
Yes.
Was she a housewife when, like, Paris got famous? Was Housewives a show when Paris got famous?
No and no.
Okay. See, I don't know any of this. I'm so sorry. We're getting off topic.
Let's keep talking about pop culture, though. I love
not.
it. Okay. Touch points. I mean, this is stupid. I mean, obviously I've never seen it, but I know about it. It's referenced.
It's in the zeitgeist.
It's iconic, but I have no experience with it. How about you? When was the first time you saw it? Were you 7? I need to know.
I don't know exactly how old I was. I was very young. I was incredibly young. I watched it on a VHS tape, so, take that for what you will. Pretty sure I was watching DVDs by the time I was like 13.
Yeah.
So, but I actually had but I hadn't seen it since. This is something that I always just kind of thought about rewatching and like never really did. And I have no real reason or excuse for that. I didn't. And I had actually thought about rewatching it recently to kind of ramp myself up for Halloween Ends. I wanted to watch this and Halloween and Halloween Kills and then, Halloween Ends. But we were doing it for the podcast. So yeah, I had to hold off. Yeah, I was super excited to watch it again. And like I said at the beginning, it held up better than I thought it did.
But do you remember when you were 7 years old seeing it for the first time? Probably. Did it scare you?
No, I don't have any particular memories attached to this movie. I don't think it scared me.
How is that possible?
Because Freddy Krueger scared me. Okay, I was afraid of Freddy Krueger. Like, that was like my nightmare movie.
Is he the Nightmare on Elm Street guy?
That is correct.
Okay.
Yeah. Oh my God.
What?
How are we doing this podcast and you have to ask that question?
We haven't watched that yet.
Oh, I know. It hurt me.
That's the whole point of our podcast.
That's
You're
true.
the horror buff. I don't know.
We need to watch Nightmare on Elm Street soon.
Okay.
We absolutely need to. I actually did rewatch the original relatively recently, and it's so good.
Great. Okay, so it didn't traumatize you, obviously.
No, it didn't traumatize me at all. Slashers never scared me. I always enjoy slashers. It's the supernatural that gets me, and that's why Freddy's scary, because he lives in your dreams, and I love to sleep. But, like, Michael Myers, like, yes, I just said he's not human. He's, like, superhuman. But, like, he's just a guy with a knife. Like, yes, it's scary, but that's not the kind of thing that scares me.
Okay, well, it is for me, and let's get into it.
Let's do it.
So it begins with the infamous score. And here's where I was like, oh, it's this movie that it's from. Got it.
I Iconic. And I will say, it also opens with like a little jack-o'-lantern on the screen.
Yes.
It's the least threatening jack-o'-lantern I've ever seen.
Cutest little guy.
It's adorable.
I wrote that down. I was like, black screen and a lit jack-o'-lantern with credits coming up in orange. Very on theme, because this is Halloween after all.
And this also was the first time a year into our podcast that you taught me something while we were watching the movie, because the credits were rolling, and you taught me that a housewife was in this movie. I had no idea.
So immediately, I'm getting Trick or Treat vibes from the movie, just because, you know, Trick or Treat also takes place on Halloween, and we get the jack-o'-lantern there. So, which jack-o'-lanterns are throughout this entire film. It's like Michael Myers and jack-o'-lanterns. That's what this film is.
Yeah, and Trick or Treat being as much of like a love letter as it was, I'm sure that was intentional. Their opening credits with the jack-o'-lantern.
Yes, exactly. Yeah. So I got a lot of Trick or Treat vibes throughout the movie. You know, both take place in a small Midwest suburb on Halloween. So there's lots of kids in costumes and a focus on trick-or-treating and the classic ideas of Halloween, which is scary monsters, tricks, scary movies, and of course, jack-o'-lanterns. I found out that this film was inspired by Psycho and The Exorcist. They purposely selected the daughter of Janet Leigh as like an homage to Psycho.
Which Deborah Hill was the one who pushed for the casting of Jamie Lee Curtis as well. That's another huge impact she had on this franchise.
Yeah, I didn't know that part. But for marketing, the executive producer, Irwin Yablin, he wrote like a whole book about this. I guess he was like very involved in the making of the film.
Yeah, I didn't read the book, but a lot of the stuff I read preparing for this referenced his things he said in the book.
Yeah, it's called The Man Who Created Halloween, so he's just taking full credit for it. It's an autobiography. He says, quote, "I found a shot of Janet Leigh in the infamous shower scene from Psycho and placed it alongside one of Jamie in a similar screaming pose. We sent it out on the wires and it made every newspaper in the country."
Wow.
So
and that's back when like the newspaper mattered, right?
Exactly. And I think you have how much money it made.
Oh yes, I did mean to mention that. It made $70 million in the box office off of a $350,000 budget. In today's money, it'd be like $380 million.
That's insane.
Yeah.
This is probably just one aspect of the marketing, but obviously that worked. I said that Yablin kind of takes some credit for the film. He said that the idea came to me that a movie about babysitters in jeopardy could be interesting. I reasoned that everyone had either been a babysitter, hired one, or at the very least, been a baby.
Yeah, the actual working title for the movie when they first pitched it was The Babysitter Murders.
Yeah, which is terrible. So cheesy. That sounds like a Lifetime movie.
But I would watch it though. Like I want to see that movie. That sounds great.
But it's funny, all the talk about babysitters, because Jamie Lee Curtis and her two friends, or maybe not the blonde friend, but her other friend, they're babysitting. That's the whole point of this on Halloween.
Yeah, let's use the term babysitting pretty loosely here, though.
Well,
they're
Jamie's
responsible
good.
For some kids.
Jamie's good, but I just kept getting Babysitters Club vibes to this. It was like giving me that old time, read those books. Ugh, what a time in my life. The Babysitters Club movie, so good. So that's what I was thinking about in the midst of being afraid. As the credits roll, it does say introducing Jamie Lee Curtis, which is just so wild for me to see because I've never known her as, I think she was 18 or 19 when the film was being made, and she was 20 when it came out. Yeah,
she was 19. She was actually the only of the actors that was still a teenager.
Yeah, and I've never seen her in anything when she was young. So it was just crazy to see her.
She looks exactly the same.
Exactly.
Yeah.
She does not sound like a teenager.
No. Which she sounds like she's been smoking a pack a day for 20 years.
Like she's just a full-grown adult, which is actually quite reflective of the character.
But also, all high school kids in the 70s were adults. Like we have to accept that, right?
Well, no, but I mean, like, I talk about this later, but like, listen to her two friends. They're like, oh my God, they talk like me now. Oh my God, boys. Ooh.
That is true.
Lori does not talk like that. Like, Lori is a different.
And that's exactly how you talk.
I know.
Briana just walks around the house going, boys, all the time.
The jack-o'-lantern starts zooming in until it's like just the eye and part of the nose. It goes darker. The lights blink and then it's gone. Then we see that we're in Haddonfield, Indianapolis on Halloween night, 1963.
Haddonfield, Illinois.
What did I say?
Indianapolis.
Right. It's written right here. Oh, no. I wrote Indianapolis. Whoops. What's the town? Illinois. Children are singing a song, but then it cuts to a stark white house and someone approaching it. And it's like a point of view camera.
Yeah, which was a kind of a big deal for slashers back in the day. Yeah, because it's scarier. You don't really know what's happening. Yeah.
As you know, it's my least favorite.
It was good. And speaking of Blair Witch, it was pretty shaky too.
It sure was.
It was a very shaky point of view.
Yeah. Two people are inside the house. They hug by the door, and then the camera follows them. The person follows them into the living room. They're making out on the couch. I couldn't tell if it was teenagers. And even when he killed her, I couldn't tell if she was a teenager. But they were teenagers.
Yeah.
The boy ensures that they're alone in the house, and she says, Michael is around somewhere, and then they go upstairs. The person watching, so the camera, it goes to the right, and then it back, and I fully jumped at this because I assumed there would be something. There was nothing. He goes to the front and sees the light turn off, and then he goes to the backyard, goes inside the house, turns on the kitchen light, opens the door, grabs a knife.
And just what a little moment. Just walks in, grabs this random knife out of her drawer, and that knife is now a horror icon for 45 years.
Exactly.
Yeah.
So the arm, by the way, that grabs it was satin green with lace. And I was like, what? Who is this? Is this like a girl from the Victorian era? What's happening? But, we eventually learned that it's a child who's doing this. But to me, the hand didn't seem like it was a child's. So I Googled this because I wanted to know who that was. Do you have a guess who it could be? Whose hand they used? Because it wasn't the child who plays Michael.
Deborah Hill.
Yes.
Yeah.
Was that a guess or you knew?
No, that was a guess. Because I figure they're not going to have somebody with obviously man hands do it.
Yeah.
So they need to have somebody who looks a little smaller, so that was my guess.
Well, the reason why was because they were going to use the child, but that child was only available on the last day of shooting. Do you know how long they shot this?
I do not.
It was 20 days. They only had 20 days to do this.
It's less than 3 weeks.
Iconic film.
Yeah.
And so she just did it. They just used her hand.
There are 20-day stretches where we can barely produce one episode of this podcast.
I know. Exactly. The killer goes to the dining room, then to the living room, then to the stairs. We see the guy come down the stairs putting on his shirt because he has to leave. So they either were making out or they already had sex, whatever. Then the kid goes up the stairs, and then we start with the music. And it's this piercing, high-pitched one note.
Yeah, it does a really good job making you feel uneasy.
A mask gets put on because we can now see through the mask. And he goes into a girl's room. She's brushing her hair topless. She covers her chest and yells Michael, and then she's stabbed to death.
Yeah. And so this is kind of when you realize that it's a child, for real. And I feel that's just such a moment now. We know the story of Halloween. We've always known the story of Halloween, so it's not really a big deal. But I feel back then that must have been a big moment where it's wait, that was a fucking kid?
Yeah.
I feel that blew people's mind a little bit.
Probably. I wrote that the stabbing is cheap. It looks like the hand is the one, her own hand is the one spilling blood on her. She screams, but it's not even convincing. She falls off the bench and just kind of dies. We see her giant boobs and smattered blood. So I was looking at this and thinking, how come there's not blood? Why aren't we doing blood? And I wondered if that was an homage to Psycho, because in Psycho they didn't really include blood either, or, they couldn't. But this goes back to your point, which that it was specifically meant to not be really gory.
Yes.
Yablans was the one who wanted that. He said he wanted all the right scares in all the right places. He wanted it to be character driven instead of just a slasher, which is weird to say. I want it to be like Psycho, but I also want it to be character driven.
All the Right Scares in All the Right Places is my favorite One Republic song.
He also said, I had this idea we could orchestrate the scares and manipulate the audience. I cited the example of following a protagonist to the right side of the screen only to surprise to the left side. So that goes back to the house camera action, which fully worked on me. But I was wondering if this was the first movie to do scares like this. Do you know? It feels like it created doing scares this way.
I don't believe it was.
No?
I thought you had something on that.
No, I don't. Oh. I'm just curious if you know anything, because it just feels like this movie created a lot of things that have now become staples in the genre.
Yes. I mean, this is, it's sort of like we talked about in our Shining episode. This is a movie that, despite holding up incredibly well, if you were to go watch it now, being a fan of horror who's never seen it, a lot of the stuff might seem like trite or overdone or unoriginal, and that's because everything that came after it took a little bit from it. It's that foundation. So you definitely see it. And I don't think it invented the jump scare or anything, but it certainly was a pioneer in horror. Yeah.
Yeah. I also found him saying that he wanted to be character driven very interesting, because to me, as I was watching this, I was thinking, I don't know who any of these people are, particularly Laurie. I felt like I just didn't know anything about her. And I watched this knowing that there were sequels, obviously, but it felt like there should be sequels to it. It felt like it wasn't finished when it was.
Yeah, for sure. It's set up to have sequels.
But I don't think it was. I don't think I read John Carpenter didn't want there to be sequels. He felt this was a complete story, and then they made the sequels, and actually he didn't want to participate, but he did. To know that he was approaching it as this is a complete story, but also me watching it feeling like it just wasn't.
Well, I think it just goes to it. I think it has a lot to do with how movies are made today versus how movies used to be made. Because today you see that ending where the killer gets away, spoiler alert, and you think, oh, they're setting it up for a sequel. But I think he was just kind of approaching it with that, it's scarier if the killer gets away.
Yeah.
And that's just kind of how they ended it. So, we feel that it is an incomplete ending because we've been conditioned to expect sequels and cinematic universes and all that good stuff. But, then it was just he's gone, the end.
Well, I went on this whole journey of, watching the movie, writing my notes, learning a few things, and then understanding a few things. So at first I was watching this we don't even know who Michael is. Why is Michael like this? I need to know why. But, they don't want you to know why. Why doesn't matter. He's actually not even human. So there can't be a why.
Exactly. Yeah.
As the person leaves the house, the parents arrive home. And they're like, Michael? And that's when the camera reveals now that this was a boy. He's wearing a clown costume. That's why he had those satin lacy arms. And he's holding a giant bloodied knife. Kind of a weird face. A face that doesn't say, oops, or I'm evil. So I don't really know.
Well, because he doesn't have human emotions. Because he's not human.
I guess.
Yeah.
The camera then pans away. It was also weird to me that this was a child killing a naked woman. And then we go through watching this movie and he always kills people who are being sexy or having sex. And then I remembered, they probably created this too. Maybe, I don't know what they were trying to say, but that's what Scream says is the bad girls, the drug users, the people who have fun. Those are the people who die.
Yeah, and that's literally what Scream said. If you have sex, you die.
Yeah,
the only safe way is to be a virgin. And it's actually, I had something on that a little later. It is a very common trope in horror. You have sex, you die. It was very big in Friday the 13th. Friday the 13th was very much, at least, the earlier entries, very much killing teens who have sex. But John Carpenter and Deborah Hill actually specifically said they were unhappy that trope kind of rose after this movie. They said the reason the horny teenagers got killed was because they were busy trying to do it and they failed to notice a killer approaching. They're punished for carelessness, not premarital sex. The only reason Laurie survives is not because she doesn't have sex, but because she's by herself and she isn't distracted. She's alert the whole time. And so they were kind of oh man, that's not the message we wanted to send. That became a thing after this.
That's so funny because I don't even know if I have it in my notes or not, but I did notice, I'm these fucking people aren't noticing shit. This is driving me insane. I would notice everything. Or would I notice? I don't know. But that's reinforced throughout the entire movie that they are not noticing what's going on.
Yeah.
Wow. Okay, I like that. Next, it's October 30th, 1978. So 10 years later.
15.
Two people are driving in a car in the pouring rain. It's a nurse and a guy. Now, he's the psychiatrist, and I feel like it takes a lot longer than that for that to be explained.
Yeah, and I'm so sorry. We keep going on these little tangents, and we will get through the story eventually, I promise. But that psychiatrist, as I mentioned, was Donald Pleasance playing Dr. Sam Loomis. And Sam Loomis, anybody might perk their ears up at that, was also the name of Marion Crane's lover in Psycho. Marion Crane being Janet Leigh, Jamie Lee Curtis's mother. So that name was a little bit of a nod back to Psycho.
That's cute.
Yeah.
He says, you ever seen anything like this before? And they're really talking about who, I didn't know whether he was like a patient or a prisoner at this point, but they're talking about Michael. And he's like giving her instructions to not underestimate him, but he doesn't talk, so don't worry about him talking. It gave me Hannibal vibes.
Yeah, for sure.
Silence of the Lambs. That's
I would go so far as to say I'm sure that was inspired by this a little bit.
Yeah.
And it definitely, like, before you really see Michael, before you see what is to come, he seems cold. He seems harsh. Like, he seems like it almost cruel, like, for saying that this isn't a person.
Yeah.
But, like, he's right. He's dead on 100%.
Yeah.
He's the only person in this movie who knows what's going on the entire time.
They talk about how Loomis never wants Michael to get out. I think they were doing like a transfer. They were transferring him from this place to another place.
That is correct.
Of the law.
Yeah, he had to go somewhere else. He was ordered to go somewhere else, and they have to transport him.
Yeah. So they pull up, and there's patients just wandering around outside. And she's like, since when do they let them wander around? And he's like, they don't. And he's freaking out. It's pouring rain. And when they show things through the windshield, it's like the camera's in the backseat of the car. So your view is very restricted. And then it's dark. You can't see anything. I was like, why is this a Game of Thrones episode? I can't see what's going on at all. So I had to Google it. And it was just because they didn't have the money for lights because they had $300,000. So...
yeah.
Loomis runs out to make a call at the phone by the gate. And then while he's there, someone climbs up the back of the car and she hears their footsteps. She opens the window like an idiot. And whoever it is, spoiler, it's Michael, he grabs her. In fighting him off, she like pushes her foot onto the gas and just drives off the road into the grass. He breaks open the window on the other side. She gets out. He drives off, so he takes the car. And Loomis runs up to make sure she's okay.
Which, if he has been in here since he was 8, how does he know how to drive a car? And then they actually do address that in the next scene, which made me really happy. But, like, as I'm watching it, that's immediately my first thought. Like, how does this dude knows what he's doing?
Yeah.
You know, like, if he were in there since he was, like, 13, you could be like, okay, it was the 50s. Kids drove when they were 10. It's fine. But he was definitely too young to reach the steering wheel.
Yeah.
So...
well, what do they say? Because I don't think I have that specifically in my notes.
When Dr. Loomis is meeting with the person who runs this hospital and they're talking about Michael's escape. And he's like, how does he even know how to drive? He's been in here for 15 years.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Well, we go back to Haddonfield on Halloween. Laurie's leaving her house to head to school. Her dad comes out and reminds her to leave keys at the Myers house because someone's coming by to look at it. So I'm guessing he's a real estate agent.
Yes, he's a realtor. And that is why Laurie finds herself at the Myers house where Michael gets his peek.
Right.
If her dad just dropped off those fucking keys himself, none of this would have happened.
A kid comes running up to her, Tommy, someone she babysits, and she's babysitting him tonight, and they're talking about their plans to, like, watch movies, eat popcorn, carve pumpkins. They reach the Myers house, and so that's where I learned that this was the house from the beginning, and it's now in shambles, so no one's living there. Tommy's afraid to go up to it. The rumor is that it's haunted, but Laurie isn't scared, and so she goes up to the door and leaves the key. And then from inside the house, we see Michael, but they don't see him. They return to the sidewalk. Tommy goes one way. Laurie goes on, continuing to walk down the sidewalk. We watch her walk away. She's like singing to herself happily. And then Michael comes up to the camera and just watches her walk. And he's breathing heavily through the mask like a creep.
Yeah, it's a good touch, the breathing.
Back to Loomis. He's talking to another psychiatrist at that hospital from which Michael escaped. They're basically arguing about the significance of this and the danger.
Yeah, and like this is one of those things, we're New England people, so I guess like in the Midwest and in the West it's different. But like the head of the hospital's main argument against Loomis is like, Haddonfield's 150 miles from here, as if that's so far. That's like 3 hours.
I know.
We could drive that. We drive that all the time.
That's what I thought too. I was like, that's not that far.
It's not even that far, but it is to people in other parts of the country. And we constantly forget that because we live here.
It's also very dumb cop theme because this psychiatrist supposedly should know Michael and how terrible he is. And he's like, whatever, it's not that big a deal. Like, this should be alarming that a psychopath is free.
Yeah, he's probably just like, well, not my problem. He was going to go to that other place anyway. Glad to get him out of here either way.
And if you believe he can't drive, he can at least drive to the next town or the town that you're in right now and start killing people. So, like, I feel like it's important, but we don't care. Back to Haddonfield, Laurie is in class. It's boring, so she kind of starts spacing out, and she just looks out the window. and she spots Michael standing behind a car across the street.
And that is another like classic horror movie shot. The student looking out the window, catching a glimpse of something. We covered It Follows, and I don't know if you noticed, there are so many parallels. It Follows took so much from this movie.
Yeah.
You know, between the way the soundtrack really accentuates the action and a lot of the shots of the creature or her seeing it outside the school window, things like that. So that shot is another one that you're like, oh, student seeing the ghost outside the school, real original. It's like, this started it.
Yeah, but it's still effective because...
Oh my God, yes. It's great.
I hated this. It's just one of those things where he could be looking anywhere, but you look out the window and you're like, he's looking at me.
Yeah, and you made like a noise when he appeared. You're like, oh, yeah. you were very unhappy.
I noted here too. I'm like, this has been done over and over and over again, but it still works. Plus, you know, the mask, like whatever, his face looks insane.
Well, and that's funny though that you said this has been done over and over again. Think about how you would have felt seeing this for the very first time.
I know.
Oh.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Did you have something about the mask?
Oh, yes, I did. The mask is William Shatner. It is a Captain Kirk mask from Star Trek. They dyed it white. They stretched it out. They removed the eyebrows, the sideburns. They did a little work to it, but it is William Shatner's face. And if you squint, you can kind of see it.
I wish we knew what William Shatner thought about that.
I'm sure he's spoken about it. William Shatner said he was in disbelief the first time he saw Halloween villain Michael Myers. His initial reaction was, I thought, is this a joke? Are they kidding? It was discovered in a magic shop on Hollywood Boulevard by production design and editor Tommy Lee Wallace. He enlarged the eye holes, removed the eyebrows and sideburns. He painted the mask white, darkened the hair. And Shatner said, I recognized it as the death mask they had made for me. They made a mask of my face on Star Trek out of clay, so I would not have to be available for the prosthetics they would have to put on my face to look old or evil or whatever it was they were making me look like. So somewhere along the line, someone got that mask and made a mask out of it for Halloween, for the holiday, Halloween.
Oh.
And then, yes.
So he recognized it immediately.
I guess he did,
That's so funny. Lori looks away because she's uncomfortable, and she looks back to find him still there. The teacher pulls her attention, and she gives a perfect answer, even though she absolutely was not listening to whatever the teacher was saying.
Fucking nerd.
And then when she looks back to the window, Michael and the car are gone. If we compare this to modern day horror, Scream uses phone calls to like taunt the main character, while Michael uses good old-fashioned stalking. As someone who's still new to horror, me, watching movies like this really help put the pieces together of what the horror genre is. I kind of talked about that at the beginning.
Yeah, you know, it's been kind of a push and pull on what movies to cover and when for this podcast because, you know, I want to save iconic things like Halloween for moments that matter, like actual Halloween or milestone episodes or things like that. But watching this has really, you know, made me realize that some of this, you kind of need those foundations to be a fan of the genre.
Yeah.
You know, like seeing Halloween helps you appreciate Scream more.
Yeah,
you know,
for sure. Like there's a blueprint to how things should be done. And, you know, I would say today and maybe like in the 2000s that we've been like playing with that, or they've been playing with that quote unquote blueprint and breaking the rules and doing different things, which obviously is the nature of things. But Scream uses this blueprint while making fun of it, which is awesome. Tommy's school lets out and he's carrying a huge pumpkin for some reason. He's also getting taunted by 3 other kids about the boogeyman, which he's afraid of. When he tries to get away from them, he trips and falls and crushes the pumpkin, which is so sad. The kids run off, one of them running straight into Michael. That kid runs off, but Michael spots Tommy and he recognizes him from when he saw him at his house. And he follows him. He even gets into his car and continues following him. And when he catches up to Tommy, he slows down the car, but Tommy doesn't notice. So this is just the second time Michael's been around and people haven't noticed. Then he drives off. This is where like I realized all the things that Michael does that go unnoticed are so scary to me. It makes me wonder like what's happening around me that I'm not noticing, which I already think about. And it only made me think of that more.
Yeah.
Loomis is making his way to Haddonfield. He's pulled over at like a mile marker for the town. I didn't notice the mile. Did you happen to notice the mileage?
It was like 90 something. I don't I didn't write it down. I'm not 100% sure,
Okay.
but it wasn't that close yet.
Okay.
Yeah.
He's using a payphone to call the police. He's trying to warn them, but they're not taking anything seriously. Again, dumb cops. And I wrote, was this invented by Halloween? The idea of like the dumb people who just don't believe. Is this the first film to do that?
No, that's called reality.
Oh, okay.
Do you remember what happened with COVID?
When he hangs with the phone, he notices an old, seemingly abandoned truck further off of the road. It has like these pieces of white fabric just like flailing about. I don't get that, but he picks them up and like starts folding them.
Those were Michael's hospital robes.
Oh.
Yeah.
Who knows that? Why do you know that?
Well, I don't want to just tell our entire audience I've been in a hospital before. But no,
We've all been in hospital.
Right, but have you never been in a hospital? You didn't have to wear like a gown?
Yeah, it was just like stark white, and I looked at it as like laundry drying in the wind, and I didn't understand the significance of the truck, so I was like, I don't know what we're doing here, but I do now.
Yeah, well, it made more sense then. If they did this movie today, they would find like some grippy socks or something.
Yeah. So he picks them up, and then he notices a distinct matchbox on the ground. Now, when we first saw this matchbox was with the nurse in the car in the rain at the beginning, and I knew when they pointed out the matchbox because it's like red. I was like, this is going to show up later, but I'm not going to write the note about it, and I'm just going to remember it. And here we have the same thing popping up. So that's what tells him this is like Michael's been here because this same matchbox is here. He runs back to his own car and, of course, misses the dead body that's a little bit in the brush on the side of the road. Laurie's out of school now. She's walking off with Linda, her friend. While they head home, another friend, Annie, meets up with them. There's a lot of girl talk between Linda and Annie, and you get the idea that Laurie isn't like them in that way. Like, she's maybe a late bloomer, but she just doesn't really add to the conversation.
She's a nerd.
She interrupts to say that she forgot her chemistry book.
What a nerd.
And while Linda goes on and on about how, so what? I forget my chemistry book all the time, and my English book, and my math book, and my blah, blah book, and just as she's just rambling off in the background, Laurie sees a car turn the corner, and it's the same car she saw earlier with Michael. Annie thinks it's some hot guy they all know as it drives by, and Laurie says it's not, and Michael just stares at them. They don't get scared. What?
That's him turning his head.
You scared me.
I'm sorry. I just did like a recreation of Michael looking at them out the window, and it actually scared Briana here in real time.
God.
Sorry.
Okay. None of them get scared except for Laurie. She's kind of nervous. But that goes back to people not noticing, people not caring.
Because they're distracted.
Yeah.
Laurie is in the moment.
Yeah.
Yeah.
She deserves to survive. Annie yells, "Speed kills," as he doesn't really speed by, I feel like. But
I mean, you know how people get in residential neighborhoods.
Yeah.
Kids live
Boomers,
here.
Right?
Yeah. Drive like your kids live here.
Michael stops driving. He like slams on the brakes.
He comes to a full, complete stop in the middle of the road.
Yeah, and I got so scared.
Yeah, and he's like much further up from them, so they can't like see into the car. They don't really know that he's like, nobody's commented. I think you made a comment that nobody's commented on the fact that he's wearing a mask yet.
No.
I think it's because they just keep catching like glimpses of him. So they're just like down the road, this car just like stopped still.
Yeah.
Very suddenly.
And the three of them stand there. The music's going on for all of this, by the way. And it's almost to the point where the other two get a little concerned. They're like, this is weird. So the pause is a long pause, but he does not get out of the car. And as soon as he drives on, the other two girls just start going back to their normal conversation like nothing ever happened. The music also stops at this point too. And this is where I'm starting to notice that when the music is going, I'm stressed. And when the music is not happening, I'm not stressed. It's much better when there's the relaxed moments. Linda's the first to reach her house, so she goes off while the other two keep walking. And then Michael is standing halfway out of some bushes. Just standing there. It's not okay.
No, and it's worth mentioning, this bush, despite it being Halloween, is bright green. Yes. Which brings me to a little thing. Despite taking place in Halloween, this movie was shot in the spring in Southern California. So everything is incredibly green. You can even see some palm trees in the mountains and a couple of background shots. What they did do to make it seem like fall is they made dead leaves out of paper and they scattered them along the ground, and then they picked them up and reused them in other scenes because their budget was so small.
I was making some of the promo stuff for the podcast for this movie, and I picked an image of this scene, actually. And I just looked at the grass, the perfectly green grass, the full trees, and then these random leaves strewn about. And then I look at our backyard, which is only a few days before Halloween. And it is like all the trees in the world threw up in our backyard.
Yeah.
And that's the amount of leaves that they put. There's like 10 leaves strewn about. It's very funny.
Well, you know how warm Illinois is.
Of course. There's no snow there. Yeah. I hate it. I hate how he's peeking out. And it's not, he's not like a kid just cutesy peeking out of some bushes. He's just standing there at like, I hated it. Lori notices the other girl's just going on and on and on. And when she brings it to Annie's attention, they both look and he's gone. So she walks on up to the bush to, yell at him, I guess. And there's no one there. So Michael's completely gone. He is a sprinter. She's like, oh, Lori, he wants to ask you out. So when Lori comes up to the bushes and finds out he's gone, whatever.
Annie strikes me as like the kind of friend who's like the stereotypical women friends that are just like incredibly mean to each other. Where it's just like, I love how you just wear anything.
I hate Annie.
I wish I had the courage that you have to have that haircut. Like that's the kind of friend Annie strikes me as in this movie. She's intolerable.
It's here where I noted Annie will be the first to die.
And you're correct.
I was not wrong.
Yeah.
Annie lives next door to the house from where Michael was just hiding and goes up to her door. And when she does, Lori walks on, but she turns around to see if Michael is there this time. And he's not. He never comes. But what she does do is run right into a cop who is Annie's dad.
The sheriff.
I definitely jumped and gasped.
You did jump. And my heart leapt a little bit. I didn't jump or anything, but it definitely got me. I feel like a lot of times scares like that can feel cheap when they're ultimately nothing, but this felt like the payoff to a lot of tension that had been building. It was great, honestly.
As she approaches her house, she hears kids, and it sounds bad initially at first, and she kind of looks into it, and it's just a bunch of kids trick-or-treating in broad daylight. She goes inside and she says, I thought you outgrew the superstition. This is where I go back to them wanting to do character building for this and me feeling like this is incomplete because what is she talking about? Does she just mean like childhood superstitions? She thought she grew out of them. What's the deal here? We never know.
Yeah, I kind of took it as her just like talking to herself. Like why are you scared? You're an adult now.
Yeah.
Like, relax.
I think that is what it is because they do repeatedly show that she is a responsible girl, especially compared to her friends. So she's a grown-up.
She is.
In her room, she goes to close her windows, which are wide open.
And she has a twin bed. She looks like a giant standing next to this bed. It's irrelevant. You're actually, I don't even think we're ever even in this house again. It doesn't matter at all. But she's just like standing next to this bed. And it looks like a full grown adult standing next to like a race car bed.
Like a child's bed. Yeah,
literally.
Exactly. Yep. So this is where I was like, in early November, you're going to have your windows wide open. And these are the things, these are free. Movie makers, these things are free. You just Google nowadays you can just Google it. But they could have asked someone, called a weatherman. And been like, what's the general temperature of the middle of Illinois on October 31st? And they'll give you a number, the average. And it's not going to be wide open window weather. It's just not.
I'm going to counter that by saying that it's 54 degrees here and you had a window open an hour ago and gave me a hard time when I asked you to close it.
And it wasn't wide open. And our bedroom was 70 degrees this morning.
I don't know how you define wide open, but it was all the way open.
Okay, I forgot. But our bedroom was 70 degrees this morning, and it needed to be cooled down on this upper level.
Well, she is also on the upper level, and maybe her bedroom was really warm that morning.
I doubt it. Movie makers, these are free.
I'm sorry. This is why our podcast hasn't made us famous yet, because we just bicker the whole time.
People have said they like that.
All right.
When she closes the window, she notices Michael standing in what I thought was her backyard, but she says it was someone else's backyard later, but looking directly into her bedroom.
Yeah.
No, thank you. No, Thank you.
You were very vocal about your displeasure.
The spookster, I think she like backs away from the window, and when she looks again, he's gone. Then her phone rings. Part of me did think this would be Michael, but then I was like, come on, how's he gonna get a phone? Whose phone is he using? And he doesn't talk. All we hear is chewing. And she's like, who is this? Answer me. And then she hangs up, and then the phone rings again, and it's her friend Annie. It's Annie, right? And Annie was just chewing and supposedly saying words, but she's a bitch, so she was probably just playing a trick.
Yeah, and he's like, you hung up on me.
Yeah.
You're just chewing in my ear.
She basically says she's picking her up at 6:30. Lori lays on the bed to tell herself to calm down. Her child bed.
Yeah, and like her knees like hang off the end of it.
It's ridiculous. Later, she walks out of her house carrying a heavy pumpkin, and the music picks up again. She waits in the corner for Annie, and watches kids trick-or-treating with a smile on her face. It's still not dark out, and if it's going to be 6:30, it would need to be dark out. That's another thing that they needed to work on. But that's because they filmed it in spring. So Annie arrives, and she rushes across the street to get into her car. Meanwhile, Loomis has arrived at the graveyard with the keeper, the landscaper. What are those people called? Groundskeeper. And he knows, of course, exactly where Julie Myers is buried. So that's where they're going. This guy he really went with the role that he got selected for. And he talks about how every small town has a story like this. And he starts telling this one story about this regular family man who, finished dinner, and then he went into his garage and got a chainsaw. And with that chainsaw, but Loomis cuts him off before he says that he killed his entire family, probably.
Yeah, I think that was inspired by a real life family annihilator, I guess would be the term. Because he's not really a serial killer, because he didn't just keep killing people, but his name was John List. And he's just like a normal guy who one day just killed his family. Oh. Just, yeah, I'm going to kill him.
That's neat.
Yeah.
Love that. Love that journey.
Yeah.
They come across Julie Myers' grave, which has been dug up. And the groundskeeper thinks it's just kids on Halloween, but Loomis says he came home. So he knows.
I am now certain that this was partly inspired by John List, because John List did his killings in 1971 in New Jersey, where Deborah Hill grew up.
Shut up.
There you go.
Just the state or the same town?
Not the same town.
Okay.
No.
I was like, whoa. While the girls are driving and getting high, Michael's car pulls up behind them and starts following them.
And as this happens, on the radio, I don't know if you caught it, there was a song playing. Did you hear it?
No.
It was Don't Fear the Reaper. Yeah, which like now seems like kind of overdone and like trite. If somebody did that in a movie today, you'd be like, oh my God, that's so unsubtle.
They did do that in I Know You Did Last Summer, didn't they? Whatever song that the first girl is listening to, it's relevant.
Yeah.
I can't remember the song.
I think you're right. Yeah. But yeah, that song just came out in 1976. So this was obviously, one of the first movies to use it in that context.
Yeah.
And it was top notch.
Oh my God.
Yeah.
Well, they don't notice. This is one of the few times Laurie doesn't notice. He stops, though, because they pull up to basically a crime scene. So her dad, the sheriff, is there. So he kind of pulls off and doesn't follow them. They also didn't need to stop, but they do. They hide the weed, but they don't open the windows before they reach her dad.
Yeah, there's no way that, like, he's going to open that window and it's just going to puff out right in his
Literally,
face. Like,
yeah. I mean, they have a conversation about what the issue is, which is someone broke into a hardware store. They think it's kids because they stole knives.
Yeah, he said,
rope.
All they took was a couple Halloween masks, some rope, and a couple of knives.
Kids.
No big deal. Totally normal. Like, I mean, first of all, why does the hardware store have Halloween masks and butcher's knives?
Right.
But, like, does that not set off immediate alarm bells for you?
Dumb cops.
He says something even dumber a little later in the movie that I am so excited to talk about.
Once they drive off, Laurie is panicked that Annie's dad would have smelled it, which, valid. Annie's very nonchalant about it. And then Laurie brings up the dance and what she wants to wear. And Annie is just shocked that Laurie even gives a shit about the dance or what she'll wear. Then Laurie admits that she has a crush on Ben Tramer.
Ooh, Ben Tramer.
Annie is also shocked that she likes other people. She goes on about how it's easy to ask a guy out, and Laurie's like, no, it's easy for you. I feel you, girl. Meanwhile, they're once again being followed by Michael. I missed the part where Loomis also shows up to the crime scene and then the girls drive off. And that's where Loomis now talks to her dad about the cop about what's going on. He doesn't take it seriously and he makes him wait. And while Loomis is waiting, he has his back turned to the road and Michael drives by.
Great shot. It's tragic, honestly. Yeah. Like for Dr. Loomis, you're only a half hour in this movie, so you don't like sympathize with him that much. But in general, like it's just so sad, like how long he spends chasing Michael, and he just drove right by there. Him.
It's now completely dark, and I have to wonder how long they were driving. They reach the house that Annie is babysitting at, and Tommy's house is right across the street. So Laurie heads there. Michael watches them from the car as Laurie approaches Tommy's house, and then he gets out of the car. Loomis shows up at the Myers house with the cop. The cop says that no one has lived there since the incident. Inside, they find a dead animal. They think it's a dog, but then Loomis says he got hungry. So now the cop thinks maybe it's a skunk because he says no man could do that.
And let me just pause right there. What is scarier to you? A man with a knife or a skunk that can take down and eat a dog? That's terrifying.
Oh, I thought he meant that the dead animal was a skunk.
No, Loomis identifies it as a dog. Loomis is like, that's a dog.
Yeah, but I thought he was saying, oh, well, it must be a skunk then because no man would kill a dog.
No, I think he was saying an animal must have done this because no man would be capable of doing this.
Well, why wouldn't he say like maybe like rabid raccoon at least?
I don't know. And that is the dumbest thing that I have ever heard a cop say. Like, because if it's not a person, like, you still need to worry about it.
Yeah.
But it did give me a great idea for a film where, like, it's a slasher movie, and then at the end, like, it's revealed that it wasn't a person. It was a carnivorous skunk the whole time.
Perfect.
I mean, wouldn't that be the greatest twist in the history
of movies? Would he be cute, though? Like a cute skunk?
No. Oh. He eats people.
Oh. It'd still be cute.
It's a ridiculous question.
But Loomis's response to this is no man. So Michael is not human.
Again, he's inhuman.
So thank God, first of all, that they didn't show the dog, by the way. They go up to the bedroom where Michael killed Julie, and they're talking about what happened. Something falls and breaks a window, and it like freaks out Loomis. And the cop points out that he's scared. Loomis explains that he met him when he was 6 and 15, and he had a blank stare, an emotionless face, the blackest eyes, the devil's ears. He spent 8 years trying to reach him and another 7 trying to keep him locked up because he's pure evil. Loomis decides to wait for him at the house and tells the cop to tell his force to basically keep their mouths shut but their eyes open. So don't like make everyone go crazy, but don't be stupid. They're going to be stupid. Meanwhile, Laurie's reading Tommy King Arthur. Hidden in the couch, they find some comic books, and this prompts him to ask about the boogeyman. He's like very afraid of the boogeyman. She tries to settle his fears, and Annie calls. At the house, Annie's in the kitchen, and she's on the phone, and the family dog comes into the kitchen and starts aggressively barking. Victim blaming, but it's her fault for not being alarmed at this point. That was a German Shepherd. He means business.
Yeah. That dog is warning you, and she is distracted.
Annie yells to the kid that she's babysitting. It's Kyle Richards, Lindsay. She is catatonic at the television. The dog stops, so she's like, okay, it's fine. Let me tell you my big news to Laurie. The big news is that she talked to Ben about Laurie because she's rude.
What a bitch.
Laurie's freaking out over that. Meanwhile, Tommy is looking out the window and he spots Michael standing across the street at Lindsay's house. And he's afraid, thinking it's the boogeyman, and runs to Laurie. By the time she looks, though, no one is there.
It was an awesome shot of just like the lighting of Michael across the street and Tommy looking out the window. Like it's maybe my favorite shot in the movie. It's
terrifying.
So yeah.
Michael is outside looking into the kitchen at Annie. She spills butter all over herself and has to take off all of her clothes.
If I had a nickel for every time I was about to make popcorn, spilled butter on myself, and had to get naked,
yeah,
I would be a millionaire.
She has to take off all of her clothes to go wash them. She has no bra on, of course. She puts on a man's button-down white shirt. And I can't, because she is babysitting. This is not her house. So that shirt belongs to the dad. That's just so weird to me. Imagine if they came home early and she's just prancing around in his shirt.
I'm sure he won't mind.
No. Also weird that she just got naked in the kitchen with the child right in the other room. Just like so weird. And that shirt was huge. And I know she's a skinny little girl, but it was at least a size 3XL. And the father who left that house, we saw him. He's not fitting in that shirt. So whose shirt is it? I don't know. Lindsay is just fully hypnotized by the television. The dog is somehow outside now. Who let the dogs out? And it's barking at Michael.
I quit. I no longer want to do this podcast anymore.
She calls to Lindsay to go tell her dog to stop barking, but then it starts whimpering because Michael killed the dog. And of course, we couldn't just not have a dead dog in this.
Yeah.
One wasn't enough. Back to Tommy's house, they're watching The Thing, which doesn't seem smart considering he's afraid of everything. He talks about the boogeyman again, and she promises to protect him. They go make jack-o'-lanterns. At Lindsay's house, Annie goes outside across the yard to the laundry room. This proves it wasn't filmed in Illinois.
Yeah, a detached laundry room?
That is a Southern California thing because it's always warm there.
Wild.
Yeah.
Oh, gross.
Yeah.
Like, I don't want to bring my laundry outside.
I don't even want to bring it to the laundry room.
My apartment before I moved here, in downtown Springfield, the laundry room was in the bottom of the building. I lived on the 5th floor, and I had to walk down outside with my laundry, down the outside steps to do my laundry. Yeah, outside. It was a nightmare.
Ugh.
I could have gone down the stairs inside and then crossed the courtyard, but it was actually quicker to go down the outside stairs.
Well, in Southern California, you can go across your cute little yard to the cute little laundry room.
If I have detached laundry room money, I'm paying somebody to do my laundry.
For sure, yeah. The lights don't turn on for some reason, and Michael is outside the door. The door closes on its own, and she can't open it for some reason. And she yells for Lindsay, but there's no way Lindsay is hearing. She is engrossed in television. She is inside the house. She's across the yard. She's not going to hear anything. The phone rings, and Lindsay does manage to answer that. Somehow Annie also hears the phone ringing. She freaks out because she assumes it's her boyfriend. There's a window at the back side, and Michael is standing in that. Lindsay makes her way to the laundry room to report that it was, in fact, Paul, her boyfriend. She manages to open the door without issue. So again, I don't know why Annie couldn't get out. In her haste to escape, she tried to get out the back window and got stuck. And so Lindsay helps her to get unstuck, and they go inside together just as the phone starts ringing. Michael is seen in the yard, and the back door has been left open.
Oh, no.
After she finishes on the phone with Paul, she tells Lindsay to go get ready so they can pick up Paul. Lindsay doesn't want to go. And you get the feeling that it's always like this every time Annie babysits Lindsay. She's just like, I don't want to go to pick up your stupid boyfriend again.
I mean, honestly, if you just left Lindsay at home with the television, she seems like she'd do fine.
Yeah. Annie's the worst babysitter. Lori is like making popcorn, making jack-o'-lanterns, like reading books, watching movies. She is getting her due. They head to Tommy's house to pawn Lindsay off on Lori, so now she's going to have 2 kids. Lori agrees to take Lindsay because Annie promises that she'll retract her statements that she had made to Ben. Then Annie heads back to the house and goes to get into the car, but it's locked. So then she goes back inside to get the keys.
And as she's doing this, she is singing a song.
Yeah.
She is improvising a song about her boyfriend, Paul. Yeah. Like, she is singing about what she is doing as she's doing it, which, for those of you who don't know, is Briana's favorite activity. This house is alive with the sound of music. And she's really crushing it in this scene. It's the dumbest little song I've ever heard, and I love it.
When she reaches the car again, she opens the door without using the keys, doesn't even try to use the keys, just opens the door, gets in, and she leans forward and runs her hand down the window, I guess like the windshield because it's steamy maybe. And then Michael pops up in the back seat and just immediately starts choking her.
Yeah.
So again, no like relief between the pop-up and the grabbing. He's just doing that all in one. She fights a bit with her feet by honking on the horn, but the choking takes a very long time. I don't know if it's because the seat, the angles, but boy, it took a while.
I could be wrong because I've yet to choke somebody to death. But I feel like this is one of those things where like I think choking somebody to death is actually much longer than we actually usually see in the movies. Like it actually just takes a long time. Yeah. This is still probably too short, honestly.
But he does eventually just slash her throat, I think, because we only see it from the outside and there's no blood.
And you laugh.
Because...
You laughed at it.
Because the way that she dies, she falls forward and the horn starts honking. But after she falls forward, and normally when you see that in a scene, the person's dead. They have died as their head fell forward. She blinks and moves her eyeballs and then stops moving. So it's just a long, drawn-out death scene with like a mistake in the middle.
It was a little too long, for sure.
Tommy and Lindsay are watching a movie, and he decides to hide behind the curtains and whisper Lindsay, like, in a scary voice. While he waits for her to find him, he looks out the window and sees Michael carrying Annie's dead body into the house, which is just so dark. This little child watching that.
Yeah.
He steps away from the window and bumps into Lindsay, and they both scare each other, and he freaks out again about the boogeyman. Once again, Lori sees nothing, and she's like, that's enough. We're done with this boogeyman stuff. Back at the Myers house, 3 boys approach it talking about how they're not afraid. You know, I'm not afraid. You're afraid. I'm not afraid. And then they make one kid go up to the door. While they do that, Loomis is watching from behind the bushes, and he calls out like in a scary voice for them to get out of here, and they run off. And he looks pretty pleased with himself.
Honestly, it's a really wholesome scene. It's kind of cute. Because he's doing it to keep them safe. He's just trying to keep them away from the house in case Michael comes back. But it's like he's having fun with it. And it's honestly, it made me smile like watching it. I loved it.
The cop surprises him from behind and he jumps. So it's kind of even funnier that he's like scaring these kids and then he immediately gets scared. He reports that there's nothing strange going on. Well, your daughter is dead. You just don't know it. Linda shows up in a van with her boyfriend to Lindsay's house. So I don't know why she did this.
Real quick, back to the sheriff. So Dr. Loomis has to like convince him to like keep looking out for Michael. The sheriff is like, dude, there's nothing going on. Like, I can't waste my time on this. And Dr. Loomis is like, dude, you do not understand. People will die.
Yeah.
And the sheriff, he says, I'll stay with you tonight on the chance that you're right. And if you are right, damn you for letting him go. Which
so dramatic.
I just loved because, yes, it's very dramatic. But it's also like he's letting Dr. Loomis know up front, you're an asshole no matter how this plays out.
Yeah.
Like, if you're right, you let him go, and that's on you. If you're wrong, you're wasting my time. Either way, I fucking hate you.
Yeah. He definitely does hate him, though, because his daughter's dead.
And I also just wanted to bring that up because I really wanted to delay talking about the next scene. Because it's the worst part of the movie. It's so gross.
Yeah, okay, thank you. So they're drunk. They're literally drinking Budweisers. And again, we don't really know why she's showing up. I know she's there to meet Annie, but like, I guess Annie and Paul are supposed to already be there. So they're supposed to be like a little party instead of babysitting. And their plan is to just use this house for sex. Linda explains what they're going to do. And the boyfriend is like, got it. Take off your clothes, take mine off, take Lindsay's off. That's a child. That's the child. Why did he say that? That didn't need to be said.
So
it was so weird.
I tried to Google this to see if like somebody could give me any context or like anything. Nothing. Everybody's just baffled. This is awful. I did find one comment that is almost the worst thing that I've ever read on the internet, and I wanted to share it with everybody.
No.
It's a Reddit user named Eazil, Ezzil, talking about this scene, and somebody just like basically posted in a horror subreddit, what the fuck was that all about? And they posted this comment 8 years ago, so I mean, you know, who knows? Back then, most people weren't aware of pedophiles. Back then, a movie could practically show sex with a child, and the viewers would simply think it was humorous. I remember when I was about 8 years old, my parents would take pictures of me and my sister completely naked in different silly postures. Not because they were pedophiles, but because they just thought it was funny for us to do that. We went to Walgreens to get the film developed, and no one ever said anything. If someone did that now, law enforcement would be all over them. So if you're listening to this, get help.
That's insane. And people did know about pedophiles in the 70s.
Yeah.
I mean, it's not new.
Yeah, I'm sorry. You don't have to keep that in here if you don't want to subject the people listening to our podcast to that. But when I was trying to like find some context for this or an explanation or anything, I wasn't able to find anything, but I found that and it has haunted me since.
So the internet is as baffled as we are, though.
Yes, It seems to be. Unless I'm looking in the wrong places.
Well, that's good to know. They go inside to find it completely dark. Linda suggests looking for a note, but then they just make out instead. And then the camera pans to Michael watching them from, like, the foyer. At Tommy's house, Lori puts the jack-o'-lantern on the table. She looks out the window across the street, spotting the van, and she says, kind of longingly, like, everybody's having fun tonight. They settle in to watch a movie, and then the phone rings. It's Linda asking where Annie is, though ultimately they're fine with the house being empty because when they hang up with Lori, they just head off to a random bedroom to have sex.
Yeah, just like a stranger's bedroom. It's fine.
Yeah, I wrote that a million times. Like, this is a stranger's bed. So they go to the master bedroom where, by the way, there is a lit jack-o'-lantern. Who everyone has that in their master bedroom as Halloween decor.
I assume Michael put it there.
Oh. Because he wanted to decorate?
Because he's about to kill them. I don't know. I'm just guessing.
I mean, okay, so they're going to have to make the bed after, right? It's just weird to have sex in a stranger's bed. And I know the teen movies do this all the time, but it's still weird to me.
I'm going to go ahead and like assume that somebody who is having sex in the stranger's bed is probably not worried about like making it for them afterwards.
It's really rude, though.
It is rude, but making the bed doesn't make it less rude.
They're interrupted by the phone, but they can't answer it since they're not supposed to be there, so they just take it off the hook.
And Bob is like, he's like, I can't keep it up because the phone keeps ringing. What?
He's a high school boy.
I know.
That's what I mean. Is
the sound of a ringing phone would get me hard when I was 14 for no reason. Because that's how it works when you are between 14 and 19. I just hated that line because I was like, what do you mean the phone keeps ringing? That's difficult for you? Get out of here, buddy.
They go back to the sex and a shadow passes on the wall. It's Michael.
You gasped.
Yeah.
You gave a loud gasp.
They finish and they smoke, and now they're smoking in someone else's room.
As they finish, you said, oh, was that fucking? It didn't look like it.
It just wasn't a great sex scene.
No, it wasn't. I will say, though, as a former smoker, that cigarette after sex, it is really good.
Okay.
Yeah.
But it's someone else's bedroom. This is so rude.
I mean, again, though, like, once you've fucked in the bed, nothing matters. Like, nothing could be worse, you know?
I guess. Linda makes Bob, that's his name? I couldn't remember.
Yeah, Bob.
Okay, go get some beer. He walks around the house.
What does Bob say before he leaves the room?
I don't remember.
I'll be right back.
Oh.
You never say I'll be right back.
Rule number 2
Yeah.
or whatever.
Yeah.
He walks around the house without turning on a single light, and he knows exactly where to go. He even knows what cabinet things are in. Okay.
Well, I mean, I think the assumption is Annie has babysat Lindsay before, and they've done this before. They seem pretty well acquainted with the house.
There's a noise, and the back door slowly opens. He approaches. He thinks it's Annie and Paul, like, playing a prank, and then closes the door. He opens the pantry, and then he's kind of like, it's Linda. She must have come down. Then he opens another door, and Michael comes right out, starts choking him, and then stabs him. And when the camera pans out, his body is stuck to the pantry with the knife.
And I have 2 notes on this scene. The first is this was where you first pointed out that he moves so quickly.
Yes.
Like, as soon as Bob opens the door, Michael just has his hand on his throat and is pushing him up against the wall. It's so quick. This made me realize that, like, not only had you never seen Halloween, but you don't know horror, you don't know Halloween, you don't know Michael Myers at all. So you don't really know, like, that he's superhuman at this point.
Yeah.
Like, this is your first exposure to it.
I've heard you tell me that, like, Jason, Michael, and maybe Freddy Krueger are, like, super, well, Freddy Krueger's not even human, but, like, superhuman. And I just thought of that, like, oh yeah, because they just don't die, they just keep coming back. But I didn't think about it in, like, their actual existence.
Yes, they are peak humans. The second thing is this scene. It was very, very small thing, but it had maybe the biggest impact of anything in ever.
I thought about this too, I think.
The head tilt?
Yes.
So as he's pinned to the wall, Michael just sort of looks at him and just slowly tilts his head to the right, to the side. And that look is now everywhere.
Everywhere.
Like, that is the default psychotic look.
Yeah.
Like, for everything. It was like what all the, like, new metal bands did in their music videos too. Like, the guitarists, when they wanted to look edgy, were like up in front of that fisheye lens and then just like tilt their head to the side.
Yeah.
And it's just such an impact on culture as a whole. This one little head movement now just signifies psychosis.
It's so scary. In music, Marilyn Manson does it. I know, like, Slipknot, they're the ones who wear the masks, right? They do it.
Yeah.
Oh, fucking hate those masks. They're so scary. But I spotted it. I was like, oh my God. And they show it from the side, actually.
Yeah.
So it's not the front facing that we see now. So it's almost like if you're not looking, you're going to miss it. Or maybe you don't even realize what he's doing. But he moves it slowly. And I was like, oh my effing God, this is so scary. And I felt like this had to have been the first time it was done because of the fact that they showed it to the side. So I had to research it a little bit because I needed to figure this out. Because I immediately thought of like The Strangers, which I've never even seen, but I'm pretty sure there's a head tilt in that. And that's what I envision when I think of that movie, and it scares the shit out of me. So Nick Castle, he was one of the people that played Michael. There's a few other people that played him. But he was given minimal direction by John Carpenter, and that was like purposeful. But he did tell him that he wanted him to look at Bob's body as, quote, like he's observing a corpse. And so that direction was given by John Carpenter, and that's how Nick Castle interpreted it. I just love learning stuff like this happened the day they were filming as opposed to like in the writing process or whatever. Like it just like came to someone's head and now it's iconic. That's amazing.
Yeah, it's crazy to think about that.
Upstairs, Linda is filing her nails and Michael opens the door covered in a white sheet and the boyfriend's glasses, but we can hear him breathing. So aside from the fact that we know Bob is dead, we know this is Michael by the breathing. She laughs it off and she sits up. She's like showing off her boobs to him. And he just stands there. She jokes around. He keeps standing and staring and breathing, saying nothing. And she gets up and like puts on her blouse. She decides to call Lori and she has her back turned to Michael. He approaches, but she doesn't see. She's distracted. And he chokes her with the phone cord. Lori thinks, I think, that it's them having sex when she picks up the phone. And then she's like, "Are you all right? I'll kill you if this is a joke."
Solid joke. That's a great joke, honestly. I laughed.
Lori looks outside and all the lights go out at the house, so she calls the house because she's a little concerned now. No one picks up. She hangs up. She goes upstairs to check on the kids. They're sleeping. Back to the Myers house. Loomis is waiting outside still. He turns around and spots the car that was stolen. And so he approaches it. It's empty. And he starts walking down the street. I guess he figures if the car's here, Michael can't be too far. Lori grabs a set of keys from her knitting bag and walks outside.
One thing that sets this movie apart from a lot of slashers, and I really started thinking about a lot during this scene, is that, here we are over an hour into the movie. We are basically at the climax of the movie. You can feel this movie coming to a head. And at this point, Lori is leaving the house, walking across the street in the dark to this house. And like in so many other movies, we would be screaming at the screen, like, no, don't go over there. Like, you're an idiot. But yeah. She has no reason to be afraid of it. Like she's seen Michael a couple of times very quickly, but she's not really sure what she's seen. Mm-hmm. And it's perfectly rational for her to go over there and check this out because nobody knows anybody's been murdered yet. That obliviousness actually makes it a little scarier to me because you think about all those times like when you're coming up the basement steps and you feel creeped out because you feel like there's something behind you and you're just like, no, there's nothing behind you. You have no reason to be afraid. Like that's what Lori was doing in this situation. Yeah. But she was right. She was right to be afraid. And that just makes it so much scarier because there's no rational reason for her to be afraid and she still was. And she was right.
Yeah.
Yeah.
She rings the doorbell, calls out for Bob and Linda. She walks around the house. She finds the open back door. The body's not hanging there anymore. There's no blood, so Michael cleaned up his mess. I don't know why he bothered to, but he did. Lori walks around the house calling for her friends, telling them they can quit the joke. It goes on too long with this, of the quitting of the joke yelling, but whatever. She also doesn't turn on any lights. There's a thud, and she's like, okay, meatheads, joke's over. She goes up the stairs, and I wrote, come on, just leave, don't go up the stairs. Like, come on. But then I said, I guess this movie created every trope. There's one room with a light on. The door's mostly closed. And she goes into it. When she opens the door, she sees on the bed Annie, dead, with the headstone of Judith Myers. It's weird.
Pretty badass.
She backs up to the wall, freaking out. Paul's body comes down like it's hanging somewhere. That scares her. Then a closet door opens and it's Linda. She dramatically backs away against the wall. And in the darkness, of the other bedroom doorway, she's kind of like in the corner, we can see Michael, which is probably an iconic shot.
I mean, it's incredible.
It's so scary.
It's because you can see that the doorway is there, but it is pitch black in there. You cannot see anything in the doorway, and his face just appears. You can't see his body. You just see his face. You see that white mask in the darkness, and I could talk for hours about just how awesome that shot is. It's so good.
He slashes her arm, and I just knew that Jamie Lee Curtis survives. Obviously, that's all I knew about this film. I wasn't thinking about the whole final girl thing. I was just thinking, I know she lives. I didn't think he was going to hurt her because I thought he was like infatuated with her. So when he slashed her, I was like, oh, he is going to try to kill her. Oh. He misses and she backs away. She falls over the banister and down the stairs where she should fully now be dead because her neck snapped.
Yeah, it's a brutal fall in theory.
She does get hurt. It's just her leg, but she still can walk. The front door is jacked. She can't open it. So she runs to the kitchen, which also has its own like separate door. So she closes the door into the kitchen, locks it, tries to get out the back door, but there's a rake propped up to prevent her from opening that. He makes his way in, breaking through the door, but she does manage to get out in the nick of time. Like I said, her leg is hurt, so she kind of stumbles across the yard screaming. She goes to the neighbor's house, bangs on the door, screaming, help me please. They turn on the light. They look outside the window. They turn off the light and ignore her.
I mean, honestly, big millennial energy right there. Like, I'm not answering my door. I'm sorry.
So rude. And it doesn't track with this neighborhood. We have this like very like idyllic suburban town. They would have opened the door, but whatever. She goes back to Tommy's house, screaming for him to open the door because she can't find her keys. He's like groggily getting out of bed, like, yeah, I'm coming. We see Michael making his way from across the street. So this is that scene that we were talking about at the beginning where it's like, there's that killer walk that we all know and that I expected to see a lot more of. But I guess when you invent it, you only have to do it once. It's everyone else who just maybe does it too much.
Well, and there are like 20 other Halloween movies where he does do a fair share of walking.
Sure.
Yeah.
Halloween, hiking. Tommy opens the door just in time. In the living room, there's another door magically on the side that was open. I don't know.
It was a window.
It was a window.
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah.
It looked really big, but I hadn't noticed it before. And she notices that's open. And so he's inside there. Now Tommy's gone back upstairs, so he's safe for the moment.
Yeah. She like tells him to get upstairs. He doesn't just like go back. She's like, get upstairs, lock the door, get in the room.
Yeah.
Yeah.
He's behind the couch. He stabs at her again, but hits the couch instead. She reaches into her knitting bag and stabs him in the face with a needle, which I knew would happen as soon as we saw the knitting bag.
But it's also like the least impactful stab I've ever seen.
Yes.
Like it just like goes in and it's just like, that's stab.
Yeah. There's no sound effect to the stabbing. I was very much like, why is it silent when they stab each other? It happens throughout the whole movie. So I had to Google like the sound with the stabbing, and it was a watermelon. They were stabbing a knife into watermelon, and I don't know, silencing it still because it just didn't have any sound. So she gets him like in the face. Michael is down. She takes the knife. She peeks up over the back of the couch. She sees that he's down. So she runs upstairs. Meanwhile, Loomis is walking through the neighborhoods. The cop finds him, and he reports that he found Michael's car, so he must be around here somewhere. They kind of split up to find him. Lori runs upstairs to the kids. They're very scared, but she's like, it's okay. I killed him. No, sweetie, you barely hit him in the face. She's comforting them in the doorway, and we can see Michael coming up the stairs. They all hide in the bedroom, although I think the kids go into like a bathroom. I don't know. And she goes into the closet, and she cinches it closed with like a rubber band or something. When we see his shadow approach and he tries to bust open through the closet, she's just like screaming in the corner. This is where she is really like channeling her mom. Screaming. He breaks through with his arms and inadvertently turns on the light. I was like, was that an accident? And they just kept it in. But then she uses that to reach for a hanger, and which she manipulates into a weapon. And when he busts through the doors, she stabs him like in the eye with the hanger, and he drops the knife. She grabs the knife and stabs him. He falls back. Again, there's no sound with the stabbing. Michael's down again. Now, because she stabbed him, I guess she thinks he must be dead. Personally, I think I would stab him again just to make sure.
I don't know if I'd stab him again. I think I would just leave. I'd be like, I don't know if he's dead, but I need to get the fuck out of here.
Instead, she just drops the knife right beside him and goes to the kids. She tells them to go next door to the Mackenzies, have them call the police, send them over here. They run off. She falls to the floor, but we see Michael sit up.
And that right there is like, that's iconic.
Yeah.
Right there. I don't know if you've ever watched professional wrestling, but there is a professional wrestler who is considered by many to be one of the greatest of all time called The Undertaker.
Oh, I was going to ask if it was him.
And that's his thing. Like when he's like down and knocked out and then he just sits up just like that. Arm still at his side, just sits straight up.
Yeah.
It's straight from this.
It's very Frankenstein.
Okay.
Yeah, it's just like stiff, not human. Tommy and Lindsay run out of the house screaming, and it just so happens Loomis is walking by at the same time. Then as Lori stands, Michael stands. She starts to walk away, and he grabs her. She fights him. She pulls off the mask, which I wasn't expecting.
Yeah, we see Michael's face, which is just kind of like later on we'll just be like, nah, that never happened. Like, nah, don't worry about it.
Okay, I wondered. Is Michael like deformed?
No, he's not deformed or anything.
Okay, I thought he must be, and I also thought because later masks are almost attached to the face. It looks like, at least like in the promotions that I've seen, like it goes back to the ear. I know that for sure, and it's not so loose that it's obviously a mask. So I was like, what's his backstory? Did he fall in acid? Like what's up?
No, it's just one of those things that like seeing his face makes him less scary.
Yeah.
Like, you need to remember, like, you need to see him as an inhuman monster to be afraid of him. When that mask comes off and he's just, like, some, like, greasy-haired dude,
yeah,
like, that's not scary at all.
It was a weird choice to do that. As he puts it back on, Loomis arrives and shoots him. He stumbles, and Loomis shoots him several more times, which pushes Michael away with each shot very dramatically until he falls out the window. We see him lying on the ground, but when the doctor reaches the window, he's gone.
Gone.
Jamie Lee Curtis is just crying and crying. And then we get a montage of quick clips, like scenes of rooms throughout Annie's house and Michael breathing very heavily, a glimpse of the other houses. And then it's the end.
There is a really good line by Loomis there that I really liked where Jamie Lee Curtis is like, who was that? What was that? And he's like, it was the boogeyman. Love that. Yeah.
Okay. I saw a trailer or something for Halloween, the newest one, and she kept mentioning the boogeyman, like that's it, the boogeyman's over, something like that. And I was like, oh, I get that now, cool. And I was like, it's nice that they carried that through the whole thing.
And so as the movie ended, you went, that's it?
Yeah.
You were so upset.
It was an abrupt ending. It felt like an abrupt ending. I also felt she's the final girl, and again, she's the first final girl, so they invented this without even intending to invent it. But I just felt like there needs to be more avoiding of the killer before we have the final girl. No one knew there was a killer until they were killed.
Yeah.
It was just kind of weird. But that's because this is the one that started it, and everyone else took that and did things with it.
Exactly.
So, what did we think of this film?
Loved it.
We hated it.
Yeah.
No, just kidding. Jump scare.
I gave it a 6. There aren't many, but there are some good ones.
Yeah, I gave it a 5.
All right.
Nightlight.
I also gave it a 6. The good thing about Michael...
What good thing?
is that he's a very specific entity. So unless you live in Haddonfield or are like related to Laurie Strode, normal people don't have to fear Michael Myers.
Yeah.
You know what I mean? You get some points taken off because like you don't have to worry about that. But the tension, the way this movie makes you feel, it stays with you. So it definitely gets some points for that.
Yeah. I gave it a 5 for pretty much the same reason. Before I saw this movie, I thought Michael Myers was just a gonna kill anybody killer. I didn't think he was specific to the town. When I saw the trailer for the last Halloween, not the one that just came out, but the one before that, while I was watching Beverly Hills, the town is very much involved in that one. And so that's when I was like, oh, the town is uniting against him. So it's limited to the town. But still, I just didn't really think about it. I thought he was just a kill-all entity. So yes, I can separate it because he's only going to kill people in Haddonfield.
Exactly.
I don't live there. But I was thinking about it a little bit at night, but not too much. It's been worse before. So what's your horror buff score?
I mean, it's a 10, right?
Okay.
It's not an exaggeration to say that horror does not resemble what it does today if not for this movie. This movie is the Beatles of slasher films.
Or the Stones for some.
The Beatles. You know, I love this movie. And like I said, I expected to like it and appreciate it, you know, watching it again after so long. But it really holds up. You know, I thought it was going to be like one of those movies that's like, well, that was good, you know, and like I can see like why it's so influential and I enjoy it for what it is, but I don't really enjoy it. Yeah. But I did. I loved it. I'd watch it again right now.
So my Scaredy Cat score is a 7 because I was scared. I jumped quite a bit, stuck with me a little bit. And I'm not going to say I'm not afraid of Michael Myers still. I think I am. But my Near Fight score is a 9 because I did enjoy it. I respect it for what it is. I just didn't feel like giving it a 10. But it's a 9.
All right, fair enough.
Our next movie is, as scheduled, Get Out.
Oh, I haven't seen that since my first watch, since I saw it in the theater, so I'm excited to watch that again.
I'm not.
It won't scare you.
I'm excited to see Jordan Peele's work because I haven't been able to. So I'm expecting it to be very good. And anything else?
I just wanted to add, at the end of every episode, we ask for like a 5-star rating and stuff like that. But on top of that, you know, like we want a 5-star rating to help help us in the algorithm and get us listeners and get us famous so we can be millionaires. But more importantly, we want feedback. If you have any suggestions, if you have any criticisms, I mean, we want feedback. Send them our way, send them in DMs. You know, if you want to post a 1-star review and air it all out there, that's fine too. But just in general, look, I want honest opinion. I want honest feedback. That's what I'm getting at here, you know. If you got something to say, let us know. We very much want to hear. We want to make this an enjoyable podcast for our listeners.
Yeah. And with that, we'll say thanks for listening to Go a Little Mad. Please be sure to follow or subscribe to us on your favorite pod platform and like us on Instagram and Facebook at Go a Little Mad Pod. Visit goalittlemadpod.com to continue the conversation about each episode, and you can help us spread the word with a quick review and a 5-star rating, or grab some merch from our TeePublic site. Your sharing makes all the difference.